Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Howard Stern Wrap-Up Show. 888-STERN-100, 888-783-7610 is the number to call to talk about everything that Howard talked about this morning. My name is John Hine. I'm your host, joined as always by Stern Show executive producer Gary Delabate.
Hello, hello.
And the Emperor of Sternthology. His name is Rasan.
Good morning.
Good morning to you. We have a returning guest today. You can hear him on Lefsetz Live on Sirius XM's Volume channel. Bob Lefsetz, welcome back to the Howard Stern Wrap-Up Show.
Great to be here, John.
Good to see you, Bob. How's everything going?
Everything's good. I'm on tour with Jason Flom. I've been in 3 countries in 3 days, which is a whole new thing for me.
Wow.
So on some level, it's exciting. I can't think about my own problems. On another level, I don't know whether I'm going to burn out.
Yeah, I was going to say, you must be exhausted, man. That's 3 countries in 3 days.
And Jason Flom is a major record executive. He discovered Kid Rock, among others, and then Greta Van Fleet is his big project now.
It's funny, not funny, but it's not a coincidence that Bob is here. I didn't know the whole Rock and Roll Hall of Fame nomination discussion was going to happen, so we're going to get into that for sure. Plus, Ronnie at the Exotic Dancer Awards and Wolfie and how they went at it, who the greatest whack packer of all time is, Jazz Night that I'm going to, but apparently Gary doesn't want to be a part of that, and a lot more to talk about. But let's start off with what we heard at the end of the show during Robin's News, and that's the nominations for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And we do have this conversation quite a bit on this show because Gary and I are privileged enough to be voters.
But shouldn't be.
Well, that's one person's opinion. However, when Howard makes a case like that for a band like Jethro Tull, which to me I think is a slam dunk as well, I mean, look, Bob, you speak to this firsthand. Music is so subjective. You like who you like, what you've heard, what you don't.
I think you're being too generous. I believe that the organization, the nominating committee, is very New York focused, very too hip for the room. Jethro Tull should have been in decades ago.
I agree. And I mean, I agree with Tull being in.
I was just writing about this last night. They were the first act to do a whole song for one album. Never mind, they changed something. I could go on and on.
I don't think they're not in because they're not New York centric. I think they're just. I mean, there are some bands that for some reason, like, listen, they put Chicago in. They put a lot of less hip bands in than Jethro Tull.
Well, I don't want to get too deep into this, but a lot of the bands are in because they have management who works the angles and gets them in. I hate to admit that, but that is true.
But that's any award. I mean, you got, the Oscars worked that way for years. If you had the right producer, you were going to get nominated for an Oscar and probably win. A lot of times it does depend on agents and management and things like that. But my point about this is Howard gets so passionate about it and says he wants to be on the nominating committee. Gary, you know firsthand, he does not want to be anywhere near the nominating committee.
I can't imagine he'd want to be on the nominating committee. I think they whittled it down to like a 4 or a 6 hour meeting, but it used to be a 2-day meeting. Can you imagine Howard sitting in a room for 8 hours a day for 2 days discussing who should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? He'd walk in and go, Jethro Tull, I'm leaving now.
Actually, I don't agree with that.
Do you think he'd want to?
Since he did America's Got Talent, he loves playing out of his fishbowl where he can get attention and where it ultimately makes a difference. I think he might convince them to make the meetings a little bit shorter.
Well, they are shorter now. It's 1 4-hour meeting, and if they pay him what they pay him on AGT, I'm sure he'll go.
But also, one of the reasons he did AGT was for the notoriety to expand his brand. People are constantly saying, well, Howard Stern weighed in on this, Howard Stern weighed in on that, and it helps him. And deep inside, he loves that.
He does. I just don't think it helps his brand. Nobody's watching him at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but you're right. That part of his personality that says, I have something to say that's important, I would like to weigh in, that's what's making him think he wants to do the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
But do you think that Howard has a little bit of, recognition in that the Moody Blues finally got in?
Absolutely. They said it. They said it at the ceremony.
Right.
They said Howard championed that band getting into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for years.
So do you think Tull ends up on the ballot next year? He's just too late this time?
I don't know. There were bands that were on the ballot this year. I thought there were other bands that were going to end up on the ballot this year.
Who do you think was going to be on the ballot?
I'm not saying that this is what I wanted, but I had heard like Duran Duran was going to be on the ballot this year.
Right.
And I think I even heard there was a chance like Foreigner might be on the ballot.
Well,
that's right.
I think we're in the weeds a little bit here, but you should explain, Gary, because you have firsthand knowledge in terms of how the nominating committee works. And it's not like they throw every band at the wall and they come up with stuff. They divide it up into certain categories.
They have different sections. That way they want everybody to feel represented. So there might be an R&B subgroup. There might be a progressive rock subgroup. There might be a, a hard rock subgroup. So that's why you see Kraftwerk gets in every year, because they clearly are winning whatever that subgroup is.
But Kraftwerk is one of the only two acts that deserves to be in.
But that's your opinion.
You know, anybody who believes Kraftwerk doesn't involve knows nothing about today's music. It's just like disco was killed in 1979, and then disco was everywhere. Okay, Kraftwerk is the same thing. They were the progenitor. All this electronics from never even rock acts. Everything they're using comes from Kraftwerk.
Who's the other one you think should be in?
Radiohead. I'm not a big Radiohead fan, but I know what they mean to people. So ultimately, I believe Janet Jackson is not a rock act. Never mind that she's a creature of the studio.
But that ship has sailed. The rock aspect has sailed. Michael Jackson's in, Madonna's in, so it's no longer the Rock Hall of Fame.
Again, I'm just picturing.
But I don't even think she's that good anyway.
Did you see the Billboard article that said she's a bigger artist than Michael?
This is all the horseshit. You know, ever since Mariah Carey, they talk about the number ones that somebody has. Number one does not mean what it used to mean. As we sit here right now, I challenge anybody in this room to sing two of Drake's songs.
But Janet Jackson had number ones when they mattered. For me, John, I think there's only two slam dunks, and the rest I don't know how I'm going to vote. For me, it's Todd Rundgren and Stevie Nicks.
Hold on, Rasan's itching to get at Bob Lefsetz here.
I'm just saying, the music Janet Jackson made with
Miss Jackson, if you're nasty.
Miss Jackson, if you're nasty. The music she made with Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, that is legendary R&B pop music. Like,
Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis should be in there.
I mean, they should be in as producers. Do they put producers in?
Yes.
Those guys are some of the greatest producers of all time. They should be in there.
I think you're being unfair, Bob. There are some people who are a product of the studio, no doubt. You know, maybe the Archies and shit like that.
Okay, that's album Control. Name one of the other albums that she deserves to be because other than
Rhythm
Control.
Nation. This is one of the greatest albums ever made.
RN 1814?
I don't agree.
I think Velvet Rope's a great album.
Yeah,
I mean, she's got some great music.
But this is what makes the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, in my opinion, so great, because so many people have different opinions about it and think they know better, and ultimately only 5 acts are going to get in.
So I'm voting for Stevie and Todd for sure. Stevie Nicks and Todd. Who are you voting for, John?
I'm really not sure. Like, I want to really dig in and give every band a fair shot. Gary, I do serious research on this. I listen to it. I look into it. Rundgren for me is a slam dunk, though.
By the way, I want to make a point about Todd Rundgren, because Howard's like, he had one hit. He had a lot more than one hits, but I always, my analogy on him is I would treat him like Joe Torre. As a player, performer, he was very good, maybe not Hall of Fame quality.
As a producer, he's great.
As a producer, he produced Bat Out of Hell. He produced Grand Funk Railroad. He produced a bunch of Hall & Oates records. So as a producer, I think that's like winning the World Series.
Yeah, I think. Do you know Todd?
I met him a couple of times. I met him in the elevator.
He's got an edgy, narcissistic personality, and I think it works against him. I agree. He's more talented than anybody else on this entire list, but I don't think he'll get in. He just does not get recognition.
But there's always the ones who, win the award, and then they're the ones who deserve to win the award but don't get it.
On some level, I think they should never vote Todd Rundgren in, because that'll be the badge of honor. Because 30 years from now, say, oh, man, that guy was better than all of them.
That's a more rock and roll thing, you think? To not get in versus actually be in.
Exactly.
Well, if you want to get into really stupidity of this stuff, in Baseball Hall of Fame, Steve Carlton and Tom Seaver have almost the same exact statistics. They're almost exact. Everybody loved Tom Seaver. Steve Carlton hated everyone. So Tom Seaver at one point had the highest percentage ever in the history of the Hall of Fame. That Steve Carlton's not quite in that that area, because you piss people off, they're not going to vote for you.
Exactly.
What do you think of Howard, though, when he's sitting there listening to Aqualung, which is an incredible album, and then he goes to sing and he can't remember any of the words, and then he gets to that one part where he wants to jump into it, and he still can't remember the words, but you could tell how much he loves those records, and all during the news, different music cues would come up, and you just saw Howard light up like a little kid, and then he tried to sing, and then he forgot the words, and then laughed about it.
What did he say when they were playing the Beatles songs, when they're talking about the engineer that died? Howard goes, I can literally smell the bubble gum when I'm listening to this song.
And that's when music, I think, is at its best, Bob, when it evokes emotions and memories like that in your lifetime. I agree,
but just going into Tull for a minute, because I happen to be a huge Tull fan, and I didn't get into it till the third album, which is Benefit. But have you listened to the Steve Wilson remixes of the Jethro Tull albums?
No.
Well, you guys are early morning guys, but I say late at night, whatever your night is, get out your headphones, go on Spotify, go on Deezer where you can get flack, and listen. It will blow your mind. I mean, these songs, they take out all the cotton. I mean, this is unbelievable. How? I mean, yeah, and Steve Wilson has worked with another number of other acts, but I almost have goosebumps talking about it.
I think I'm one of 3 people who understands what Deezer and Flack are.
All right,
I love it. I love it.
All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, we'll have more with Bob Lefsetz. We'll move off the Rock Hall and on to Ronnie Munn, doing his thing out in Vegas. Lots to talk about. Live Howard Stern wrap-up show, 888-783-7610, Howard 100, Howard 101.
My name is Kid Rock, and you're listening to the Howard Stern Wrap-Up Show with John Hine and Gary Delabate. Something like that.
Welcome back to the Howard Stern Wrap-Up Show, 888-783-7610. John, Gary, Rasan, and Bob Lefsetz all here, talking all things Howard Stern. And before the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame conversation in the news, Ronnie was in there for a while to talk about his latest trip out to Vegas to, I can't say host the Exotic Dancer Awards because he didn't get to do that. In fact, it sounded like the only thing he got to do was host a bikini contest. And when we finally got to that point, it sounded a lot like Ronnie at a previous bikini contest, yelling out his age, having a good time, getting the party going, Gary. Because if you're going to hire Ronnie to do an event and it's happening in a strip club or has something to do with women, chances are that's what you want to hear.
I love Ronnie. I really do. I love him, and I think he's a riot. And I think, like you, John, like you always say, he's living life. But I find it fascinating. Like when I used to do appearances, and I'm not saying that I was good at them either, but I would literally labor over, like, I hope there's a good crowd there. If I get up, what am I going to say? I don't want to sound like an idiot. Like, you go through some stuff in your head. I think for Ronnie, if Ronnie's having fun, him personally, it's a good gig.
Well, he's an improv guy.
But it's not for, it's regardless of what the audience thinks. If Ronnie's having fun, it went well.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I think, Bob, that Ronnie, when you bring Ronnie aboard, you're expecting a guy who's going to have thrown back a few, is going to be yelling, he's going to be out of control, and having a good time in a certain kind of way, which he's really become famous for on this very show.
I can't get over how Ronnie looks as opposed to how he talks. He looks, if you just saw him on the street, a demure relative guy, and I can't square the guy on the radio with the way he looks. I remember, Googling him years ago. As far as, you have to understand, this is one of the great things. It's a fish out of water story.
But you didn't see the picture of him in his 70-year-old skateboarding outfit, did you?
No. I guess, I still have to catch up on some stuff. But I think if you have all the people who are dying to be in show business, know what show business really is. This guy was a dry cleaner and then a limo driver. So you throw him there, he doesn't have the same frame of reference. I know you give him shit all the time, and I think, yes, he loves it because it draws more attention to him, but you have to let Ronnie be Ronnie.
Isn't that the beauty of Ronnie, though? The fact that he's completely unaware of the whole show business thing?
Well, he's got a thin skin to boot, which, of course, when you push the buttons, he gets all freaked out. I think that is the beauty of Ronnie, but Howard is always messing with him for trading on the name, and he wouldn't have this. He weren't associated with the Howard Stern show. So on some level, it's a shtick for the show, but it's great. It's like, did you ever take someone outside the business to an event? Like an MTV event in the back days? They don't act like anybody's ever been before. Okay, they start saying, I got to talk to that person. They know people you don't. And it's great just to watch. You're laughing because no, you got to be cool. You don't talk to this one. You don't talk to that one.
See, Ronnie got his back up today for a couple of reasons. One was early on, Howard played a clip of him doing a speech for the guy who I guess runs Rick's and hires Ronnie to do a lot of these events.
A high amount of respect for.
A tremendous amount of respect for. And Howard asked you, Gary, to find anybody who had heard Ronnie speak about Howard in those terms, and nobody came to your desk.
But Ronnie made the point of saying, of course I wouldn't speak about Howard that way here. It's how I speak to outsiders.
He's always messing with this. Everybody is thrilled to have their job here. Everybody loves Howard. And this is just a point you constantly bring up. No, you're out trading, doing these great things. You owe me. But deep inside, Ronnie knows that he owes Howard.
Of course.
He knows he's not bigger than Howard.
We all do. There's not a soul on the show. I'd like to believe. There's a couple of people who have left the show who believed it.
Right.
But there's not a soul on the show who I believe thinks that they would have the stuff that they have if they weren't on the show anymore.
The other thing... sorry, Bob, go ahead.
No, the other thing is, it's fascinating that Howard always gives everybody shit for the things they do, trading on the Stern name, but he doesn't do anything and I think somehow it's his brand and his identity, but deep inside, he would like to do them.
I think years ago, I mean, he even said to me, it made him crazy that like 20, 30 years ago, it made him crazy that I would be out and, going to meet women and hanging out and being up all night while he was home and married. It just irritated him. He said it didn't make any sense, not your fault. He goes, I wanted to be married and you wanted to go out. It's not your fault, but it pissed him off.
Well, he loves, he's jumped a few generations. He loves talking with Jim about hanging with Jimmy, hanging with Jennifer Aniston. He didn't use, going to Mexico. He never used to do any of that stuff.
Right. No. I think he's a better person now. I certainly would not want to be coming in every day with the guy who was pissed off still living in his basement. I think it would be a very difficult place to be.
But most people go through all the levels. They have the people they grew up with. Like Dr. Lou, whatever. Then you move up into the people you meet. He skipped all that stuff.
That's not true. That's really not true. He went through a couple of levels.
I mean, but wasn't he, when he was still married to Allison, wasn't he living in the basement,
yes,
not really connecting? And now that he's remarried and he's experiencing life because of his stardom, he can interact with a much higher level of person. So it's almost a bring down to say, go to Vegas, do this. But part of him, I think, is interested in interacting with the people. Howard loves people.
I don't know. I don't think Howard wants to interact. John, do you think Howard wants to interact with the people that Ronnie's with?
No. I see what Bob's saying, though. I think Howard likes the idea of it, but not actually. He'll never do it. But I don't think Howard wants to switch places with Ronnie in any sense, because Howard's pretty happy living the life that he's living right now.
But isn't that a running theme on the show in general? Howard loves to interview like these army guys, and he's like, but I don't think he really wants to do what they're doing.
Right.
And Howard interviews a lot of people, and he loves their stories. Their stories are so great. But I don't think he wants to be them.
I agree. Let me just separate the issues out. He loves talking to people, yet he lives in isolation.
Right.
This is what he goes to the shrink. I go to the shrink a lot myself. I'm stunned that they're not dealing with this. I'm not telling him to walk down the street. He's a famous person. But interact with more people. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe it's more of an image and he's actually interacting with more people because he loves it. And there's a psychological thing. He talks about this all the time because I feel the same way. Okay, I don't want to go to this party. I don't want to go to this party. What if there's nobody there I know? I'm going to stand in the corner. What am I going to talk to? Do I have to make conversation? And it's a huge hurdle to get there. And I've gotten to the point as a result of therapy, I'll have a good time. And so it's surprising to me that he doesn't go out more because whenever he goes, he seems to have a great time.
Yeah, well, when he ends up going. I mean, That's the thing. In his head, he'd much prefer not going and just
but it's about fear. The fact that Ronnie has no fear. If you speak to the point you just brought up, that he just feels that if he's good, he doesn't care about the audience. For someone who has OCD, someone who has social anxiety, that's like so admirable. You can't believe it.
That's a fair point. Ronnie does have no fear. The other thing that got under his skin, though, was Wolfie was there. And you could tell Ronnie had it in for Wolfie from the get-go.
Well, it's funny because Howard said, why did we send Wolfie? And I said, because Ronnie hates Wolfie. And Ronnie came in and goes, I don't hate him. And then it became very evident as it went on that Ronnie hates him.
You could tell Ronnie was all about turning the tables. That's all he wanted to do.
He tried to pull everything out. He left the microphone upstairs. He got a lap dance. Like Ronnie was just like, clawing. Listen, we've all been that rat in the corner.
But since it's open season, and I know on previous wrap-up shows say everything is fodder for the show, does Howard ever dig deep in your personality such that you go home and you ruminate, you say, well, I wish everybody didn't know that?
Are you out of your fucking mind? That's like half the days.
You're looking directly at the right guy, Bob.
Oh my God! You know how many days I've got? Do you ever hear Benji talk about how he used to go home and cry?
Right.
No, of course. There's many times you're in the car ride home and you go, why did I talk about that? And I didn't think. Sometimes you go in and you think you're going to say something, and he's going to go, oh, that's so cool, and it just turns into a whole. It's not what you thought it was going to be, and you go, why the fuck did I even bother in the first place?
So much of this show is pleasing the boss, and that's what everybody here really wants to do.
Is. If you're getting paid, you're pleasing the boss,
by hook or by crook. So whether it's Jason ratting people out, whether it's Gary finding an interesting fact, whatever it might be, it's all about wondering how Howard's going to take it, and if he likes it. And if he loves your idea, you feel like a king for a day. But if he hates your idea and like skewers you on the air, it can wreck you to the point where you're just like, well, I'm not going to bring anything to Howard again because he's just going to get all over me. And different people here handle it different ways.
But how long does it take you to metabolize the bad feelings, or do they stay with you forever?
Well, for me, that's probably my greatest talent is I can get over it quick. They do stay with me forever, but I can get over the worst part of it very quickly.
And I think that's because Howard does that. Like when the break comes, you're on to the next thing. And no matter what just happened, you move on to get to the next segment.
But there's nights, believe me, there's nights where you put your head on the pillow and you go, God damn, what the fuck was I thinking?
But also, since you reveal all that stuff on the show, do you find you're more revealing in your everyday life?
Yeah, probably too much.
No, really?
Yeah, probably too much.
How about you, John?
I don't think so, but a lot of times I'll find myself in a conversation later saying, wow, I can't believe that, someone will latch onto something that I didn't think was a big deal, and they'll be like, wow, I didn't know that about you. Here, you're so on guard, and at least I am very on guard, and you want to make sure, okay, what I'm going to say now is going to either play well or be okay or something I'm not going to be embarrassed about or whatever else. When you act that way all the time, when you get out of here, sometimes you forget that. But you quickly realize, especially in this day and age of social media and whatnot, it's coming back here. Everything's coming back here.
And how about your wives?
My wife has learned to deal with it well. She really has. My wife, she had to come home to a guy who got squirted in the face and a guy, who was slapping a girl in the ass with a fish and all sorts of crazy shit. She handled it pretty well.
Yeah, my wife's always been a fan of the show, which makes it easier. And plus, when she comes up, she usually gets complimented very nicely here. So she has no issue. In terms of me, like when she hears stuff third party sometimes, she'll be like, wait a minute, how did this happen? Where did that come from? And I'll explain
But how about
it.
things, the nature of relationships are communication, but not everything is communicated. Do you ever go home and say, your wives will say, I didn't know about that, and I don't know if I feel good about that.
Oh, it's not even that nice. You're being very kind.
Yeah.
I didn't know about that. What the fuck are you thinking?
And then what do you say?
Listen, honey, it's for work. I mean, it's all Howard's fault. This is what he wanted to do. We all answer to Howard. That's why we live here, because Howard wants to do this. I didn't even want to do it, but Howard wanted to do it. You get out whatever way you can.
Just another day at the office. We got to take a break. When we come back, we'll answer more of Bob Lefsetz's questions. We'll take some of your calls. We'll talk about Ronnie and Wolfie. We'll talk about the greatest whack packer of all time. 888-783-7610. Howard Stern Wrap-Up Show. Howard 100, Howard 101.
Sweet cherry pie.
Hi, this is Bob Lefsetz, and you're listening to the Howard Stern Wrap-Up Show with John Hein and Gary Dell'Abate. I feel like I should fuck it up to be like all the rest of the celebrities. Say John Hein and Gary
Welcome back to the Howard Stern Wrap-Up Show. John, Gary Rasan, and the guy who just talked us in, Bob Lefsetz, talking all things Howard Stern. Let's go right to the phones. We'll start with Scott in Indiana. Scott, you're on the Howard Stern Wrap-Up Show.
Hey, guys. Good morning. Thanks for taking my call.
You're welcome, Scott. What's on your mind?
Well, so you guys were talking a little bit earlier about Howard, and his social interactions and how he'll do it sometimes, and sometimes he won't. The only thought that popped in my mind was, do you think he gets all that stuff out on the air? You guys talk for 5 hours? And do you think that's really his social interaction? And by the time he's done with that, man, he's kind of spent.
Yeah, Bob Lefsetz, what do you think of that? Is he all talked out?
I think it's true, but I will tell you, performing is different from regular human interaction. So, although he talks to a lot of people, it doesn't quite hit that need of a soulful connection.
Exactly what Bob said. I think he gets a lot out on the air, but at some point, you need to not be Howard Stern. You just need to be at your dinner table talking to a human being.
And speaking of social interaction, Gary, it was revealed today that for Gary's birthday, Ronnie's birthday, some of us will be going to a jazz club. And Howard wanted to know if Ronnie was a jazz aficionado. But what I took away from that is that it sounds like you don't want to come along. And
how did you take that away? All I said was, I was on the fence about going because I was just away 2 weekends in a row, got a wedding another weekend. Like I was just looking for, it's like one of the few weekends I have where I'm doing nothing, but we're probably going to go.
No, but I'll tell you, because you said that, all that stuff you just said, but you also said that the first time you went out with us, it wasn't what you expected it to be.
Well, I'll be really upfront with you. I love hanging out with you and your wife. I can hang out with you guys any day of the week. I like JD and his wife. I wanted to get to know them a little bit better. I felt that the dinner that I was at, I felt like an extra person and like a third wheel. And I felt like Ronnie was still performing a little bit. It was a little,
What do you mean?
Wow.
you know, like Ronnie gets there and it's just like, like he's fighting with Stephanie and he's like, this is what we do. This is our thing. This, you know, like I actually wanted to talk to Ronnie, like just talk to Ronnie.
So you didn't think it was natural or organic? You
I
thought
think he just likes to, you know, be the life of the party. I don't know. It didn't seem natural.
Was Ronnie's behavior different than when just the three of you guys go out?
I can't remember. It was different, but I think it was different because the six of us have gone out a lot, so anybody else who would come along throws a little wrench into it, but I didn't notice what Gary's noticing in terms of performing.
I was sitting right next to Ronnie too, so I sat next to Ronnie because I wanted to talk to Ronnie, and it was just, I don't know, it was just something was off that night. Maybe me being there was what made it off.
And Bob, that's another layer to this place when we actually interact outside and off the microphones. What happens during that? Because eventually it comes back here to be discussed on the microphone.
Well, you know, for me, it's all about who was invited to JD's wedding.
Nobody.
Well, nobody.
I know nobody was invited, but there was a lot of discussion about it in terms of Ronnie mentoring him. So the question is, now that JD is actually married, is Ronnie still treating him like a son and telling him how to behave, or has he let him fly up and graduate to being a full adult?
I don't know.
I haven't seen any changes in that relationship.
I got to tell you, I was really touched. JD came to me like 2 weeks ago and he goes, I have a grown-up question I need to ask you. And it was like it was a simple
Well,
question.
then, of course, I have to ask, what was the question?
It was very sweet. Basically, they were throwing out a couch and he wanted to know how much he should tip the guy that was taking it away.
Oh, he asked me that too.
You know, but he goes, I have a
He
grown
asked multiple people. That's interesting.
Yeah, but I get that. I get that
Absolutely.
too. You know,
That's interesting.
You ask 3 people and then you just take the average.
Okay, do you think that JD has Asperger's?
No, I don't. I just think I mean, maybe what they used to call painfully shy 40 years ago is Asperger's. I just think he's painfully shy.
Socially awkward.
I do not, and I don't know what the spectrum is these days and how to measure any of that stuff. I do think he is tremendously socially awkward, but I've seen him acclimate to situations quite well at times. I understand why you as a listener may think it, but to me, no, I don't think he's got
Well,
it.
the only thing about it, he's like he was, you know, brought up in the woods without parents.
Well, no, he was brought up by parents. It wasn't in the woods. But yes, he probably needed a little more structure in his life. But the other thing I can say, and this is something that I don't think you can, like Asperger's is Asperger's. It doesn't get better. The guy that landed here 15 years ago and the guy that's here now are 2 very different people.
First of all, you do improve with treatment. Maybe you guys should market this as a medical treatment. But you have to learn how to look at people in the eye. You have to learn how to converse. You know, those are things you learn. So,
well, he definitely learned that here.
I don't have an investment in him having Asperger's, but I don't know anybody quite like him. But I am fascinated, just like any other listener to the show. I'm dying to meet the wife, just like Sal's wife, dying to meet the wife and hear their take on their man.
Who do you think would be more interesting for him to meet, Sal's wife or? I think Sal's wife is more interesting.
I think they're both pretty interesting.
Yeah, they're both. I think Sal's wife's more interesting because it's so shocking she's Sal's wife.
Yeah, and well, that's.
But do you think?
That's
I mean,
a whole other show.
They went through the rough period. Do you think she has a sense of humor about Sal? Like if you Google her, comes up she was trying to have this cooking show on YouTube. Okay,
She was?
absolutely.
I thought he was.
Okay, well maybe he was involved. The one I saw,
Bob,
was her-
I know for a fact she has a great sense of humor about Sal. She knew what she bought when she went to the store the first time.
I don't know.
She absolutely did.
I think she knew. Okay, if you buy something when you're 20, you know, a living, breathing thing, don't you think that by the time you get to be 35, it might change a little?
Nobody knows that, though. Think about it. When you first met Mary, you had no idea what she was going to end up. Well, you had a general idea, but when you first meet Sal, and Sal's doing all that crazy stuff that he still does now, she absolutely knew. I don't know if she knew to the extreme, but she definitely knew.
The story that always sticks with me about those 2 is Sal going to the New Year's Eve party of all of her friends, and as they were counting down New Year's Eve, Sal pulled the plug on the TV. Now, I know
That's what I didn't know.
I know it seems stupid, but when you live in the suburbs and you're at a house
Of
party,
course, I get it.
It's like everything. And Sal thought that was the funniest thing. The people fucking hated him. She wouldn't talk to him the whole car ride home. He didn't understand why she was mad, and I guess that's the guy she bought, right?
Yeah. Well, there's that aspect, but is he dumb or just uneducated?
Yes.
That's a fascinating thing. I mean, wouldn't she know that? Then, of course, as you well know, and I'm getting in hot water myself, many people believe JD's wife is a groupie.
She's not.
Okay.
Listen, if she's a groupie, it's a long con to marry somebody. Do you know what I mean?
Agreed.
It's a long way to go.
Agreed. Rasan, it's your time. What's coming up on Strengthology?
R.I.P. to Paul Allen, the Microsoft co-founder, passed away. We heard Howard's eulogy for him this morning. We'll go back to 2011 and hear when Robin didn't know that Steve Jobs passed away, the only person on this planet who wasn't aware of his death.
It was funny because I think we were coming back from vacation,
Yes.
so I think it was like he died like on a Wednesday, so it was in the news every day for like 6 days.
She just missed that one.
And then Howard
Right.
goes, and Robin's like, what?
We also heard some of Nick Cannon's new spoken word. We'll go back and play him in studio from 2015. And this day in Howard history, 2002, Evil Dave receives the Lifetime Achievement Award.
Before you, Evil Dave is great, but I want to stay on Paul Allen. To what degree did that fuck you up when you found out?
That he passed away?
Yeah.
Because of who he is or because of how young he was?
I'll leave that open to you.
I don't really like that. That doesn't mean a lot to me. Like I love that I have my computers and my phones, and I'm not really that caught up in how they got invented. But whenever I see a 65-year-old guy who has all the money in the world die, I'm thinking, if you have $200 billion, you've spent every cent you can to stay alive. And if that can't help you, then it's fucked up.
I was surprised. I mean, especially because it was a recurrence of what knocked him out of
Hodgkin's
Microsoft in the
lymphoma,
first
right.
place. It was terrible. But what he did with his money, and you'll learn right after our show, you'll hear Howard will explain all that he did. He was a really interesting dude in a lot of different ways. And to me, people think Microsoft, they think Gates. They don't realize that Allen was a big part of that.
And a big rock and roller. But I agree with Gary. I mean, I certainly knew a lot about his tech endeavors. But all that money in 65, really weird.
I mean, you have to be able to get beyond the best care available, and sometimes it just doesn't matter.
You can hear Bob Lefsetz host Lefsetz Live on SiriusXM's Volume Channel 106, and you can see him on tour debating the music industry with Jason Flom. For tickets and info, go to lefsetzversusflom.com. Anything else you want to plug while you're here?
You've got it. So that's great. Yeah, today on Volume 106, 7 East, 4 West, I have the guitarist from Toto, Steve Lukather, who is utterly hilarious. I wish I could tell. I got to have him back because the stories he told me off the air would spin your head. But if you don't know Luke, he has a very thin skin. If you just say the word Toto, he goes, whoa, what's happening? Blah, 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 blah. But since Weezer covered Africa, he's finally in his heyday. You'll love listening to him.
Bob Lefsetz, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thanks for coming down.
Always great to be here.
Rasan?
I'm good.
Gary?
I'm all good.
For Bob, Gary, and Rasan, I'm John. We're back tomorrow after Robin finishes her news, and the two best places you'll find on satellite radio, Howard 100 and Howard 101.